Hi there. I thought I'd put a few reflections together in relation to someone who, for many, is a bit of an enigma in the sporting world, and that person is Andy Murray. Um, I think many people who watch and have watched Murray over the years have experienced equal parts elation and frustration, or maybe not equal parts, maybe a little bit more frustration than elation. Um, But clearly this is a man who is a supreme tennis player. When he is in full flow, then he is right up there. Um, and yet, the caveat to all that is that there doesn't seem to be a degree of consistency. He's well documented for his somewhat innovative training techniques, but also his struggles with finding an appropriate coach. I may talk a little bit more about my perspective on that later. Before, the frustration for many was never more so perhaps than the Australian Slam defeat to Djokovic. But before I talk a little bit about that, I'd like to say a little bit about. I watched a 4-minute interview on BBC Sports site with Andy post his Berdych semi-final win. And whilst Andy Murray's never been forthcoming about his love of sports psychology, and I got a vague recollection that he actually expressed his kind of lack of belief in it at one point in his career. But what was interesting for me in that 4 minutes was how much psychology you could tease out. So I actually made a list of some of the points. I don't know how these things are kept on the website. It's probably gone now, kind of thing. But I'll just pick off some of the kinds of things that he was talking about that for me were clearly had some roots in a psychological orientation to the game. He talked about sticking to his game plan. And so part of me is thinking, okay, so first of all, is that notion of a degree of comfort with and knowing what he was going to do. So from a self-efficacy perspective, potentially, kind of thing, do I know what I'm supposed to be doing here, and that kind of stuff. He talked about aggressiveness. He mentioned being aggressive on a number of occasions, and it would have been interesting to tease out from him what he actually meant by that. But clearly, a psychological orientation, being aggressive, and it's interesting in the final, in fact, how. Looking in from the outside, whether you think, well, did that work for him or didn't that work for him? Because there was a lot of aggression, a lot of overt aggression, anger, if you like, being displayed there. And, again, one might be cautious in relation to that distinction between focused aggression and emotional aggression, if you like. But in that Berdych final, and he also talked about being able to change tactics, adaptability. Being able to. He said he didn't change his tactics that much. And in fact, again, from a psychological point, he talked about focusing on, just concentrating on my side of the court, I think was one of his phrases. Again, sort of having a task focus, not an ego focus, in that sort of sense. He talked about levels of tension and degrees of tension, and again, emotional elements to it, and he brought. I thought it was interesting right at the end how he talked about. I think he used the phrase that even women can be great coaches, and I'm not quite sure who said that women couldn't be great coaches. I think he was referring to the fact that the coaches in the tennis world it's a very male-dominated world, and the fact that Amelie Mauresmo, has clearly helped him. He feels comfortable with her and has reached a final. Offers a slight tangent. Again, this is purely anecdotal. For a long time, I've felt that what Andy Murray needs is not necessarily a new coach. Each coach will bring something new and be, stimulating and fresh ideas and so on and so forth. My personal belief from the outside, and again, I don't know Andy Murray. I've never worked there, but what he needs, as far as I can see, is some good psychology. Some good work on the mental side of his game, the approach to his game, and I hope that's in part that Amelie Mauresmo can deliver some of that. But what was really interesting for me in terms of that post-Berdych 4-minute talk was just how much psychology was in there, sports psychology, self-determination, self-efficacy, management of aggression, concentration, managing tension, and so on and so forth. I think when we're thinking about work that we might do with athletes, listening to what they say, how they say it, and us being able, if you like, to make connections is really, really important. Really important. Now, when it comes to the final against Djokovic, some interesting feedback. I mean, you go from the Pat Cash comments about, or referring to the meltdown in the Australian Open final, to a point at which Andy Murray himself refers to the psychological side of the game, if you like. But clearly something happened there at a psychological level. He talks about being distracted by Djokovic. No, I will not say feigning injury at all, but there were some interesting observations one could make about the really overt way that Djokovic was referring to potential physical niggles, if you like. And then the most cynical of us might suggest, well, that's part of the game. And Murray suggests that it actually was a bit of a distraction. He talked about the third set being frustrating because he got a bit distracted. And, I suppose, what you're talking about there is focus and concentration. Or lack thereof, lack of those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, a very, very frustrating performance to go 2-0 up in the third set and then lose whatever it was, 12 of the next 13 or something like that. Suggests, could that come under choking under pressure? If you look at, catastrophe theory, all those kinds of things. Again, ways of trying to understand what actually happened there. Apart from the purely physical, or what sports psychology is about, and hopefully what good coaching is about as well. But I just thought it was quite interesting, packed with sports psychology and psychological material. Okay, cheers.